All right.
Okay.
How's it going?
It's going good, Chris. So I'm going to lead off the discussion here.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Cool.
So
It's June 18th.
when was it?
It's June 18th.
June 18th,
Yeah.
1976?
3.
73.
73.
So here's the thing. 9, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3. I was 4 years old
Woo.
when this came out.
Classic. Classic.
And what's interesting to me is that in 1976, 77, when Kiss was really hitting the scene, Fleetwood Mac was in the scene, with Rumors and stuff like that. We were hearing all that stuff, and I was listening again to the outlaw stuff, the outlaw country. I was really big into Waylon Jennings and Willie. They were doing their thing that time. But I remember hearing this everywhere. Yeah, Rocky Mountain Way. Everywhere. It was on the radio all the time. And so the reason I wanted to kind of kick off the conversation with that is because, I can remember it from when it came out. You obviously weren't born yet, and quite a ways from being born. So how did you get into this album, and why did you choose it? What's its impact on you?
I think it does have to do with this song, but I remember hearing the whole album all the way through when I got into Joe Walsh, but I remember and that was when I saw the Eagles live, was when I really was appreciative of his playing and his songwriting and all that. But this song is kind of what I think drew me into the overall aesthetic of like maybe my kind of love for classic rock meets country and that old kind of almost outlaw what you're saying, because it does have that. You can hear
Real
it.
similar production styles. Just raw,
yeah, it is just guitars cranked. Maybe it was one take, or at least back then, back then it may have been because of the time, but also he's kind of going through the rest of this album is so grandiose, and I would believe that there are overdubs, but I could also believe because of the musicianship that most of this is probably like in the studio, raw. They're playing the guitars. They're just, it's not much overdubs. They're probably all in the room tracking it.
Yeah.
And, you can hear it in definitely the spaces they take, the breaks. This song in particular, I think just drew me in because of how cinematic it is. It's got, it starts real, like kind of that outlaw, the riff, but then it gets real open. And you hear that kind of bow, 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 bow. And then you hear the guitar comes in. You get the slide guitar. You get multiple layers of playing and soundscapes. And I think I think this song also attributes to the saying that I've heard where Joe Walsh is the guitar player's guitar player. Like, if you're a guitar player and you hear his songs, you appreciate the delicacy or the delicate nature of his playing mixed with the aggressiveness.
Yeah.
So you get, and I think that's kind of what this song does. It has waves. It goes up and down, but also it's raw in nature. So it probably, the songwriting probably didn't take a long time. He co-wrote it, so I don't.
It was actually, if I read it correctly, it was a band called
Barnstorm, yeah. So that's like, from what I know, that's his.
Joe Vitelli on drums, and Kenny Passarelli on bass.
That dude's actually been around for his whole career, pretty much. And kind of like part songwriter.
Yeah.
So you could attribute a lot of Joe Walsh's songs as almost a collaboration. That's one thing I think I really appreciate about him is maybe it's his name on top of the record, but it really is a collaboration between the musicians playing on the album.
Yeah, and I think there was a little bit of friction when it was released because they didn't necessarily know it was going to be a Joe Walsh record.
Exactly. So that, I mean, the previous album before this was called Barnstorm. No Joe Walsh in the title, but I think it still was classified as a Joe Walsh album. It's kind of real weird. But then this second album comes and it's now has his name on it, but same players. So I could see how the friction would come about. And, you know, I don't know the whole story between all that. That's probably a movie in the making type of deal. But as far as like what you can hear on the record and possibly, I don't hear any tension. If that's, I guess, you know, if there was tension in the studio and possibly like outside of it, it doesn't show up on the record. It sounds real cohesive. It sounds like
I mean, there's a really great ensemble feel to it.
And I mean, especially for the songwriting, I think each person does throw their own song. That's why the album is goes through different colors, and I don't know how to describe. Songs are not the same. There's songs that have almost like a gospel feel, but towards the end of the album, but then you have like Rocky Mountain Way, which is that straight up outlaw sound. Yeah. So the eclectic nature of the music it's real varied.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can appreciate that about the album. It's I think 8 songs or so it's not really long, 9 songs, 35 minutes for 9 songs.
Yeah.
I mean, and what you get out of 35 minutes is different. It is a
and you had that back then. You know, we've discussed this before about songs being released for radio,
and making a record.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, you just had this kind of limit. You know, you could only put so many songs on a side. Double LPs weren't the norm necessarily.
And the Rocky Mountain Way, the single itself, I think is over 5 minutes. It actually might be around that. Let me triple check, but it clocks in at 5:15, and that song goes through its like crazy fate. Like
and
you would almost
long.
It feels like it's longer because of like how many.
I think that's cool that you say that because it's a mark of good songwriting. You know, you listen to a song and you think, man, the song is so good. It just goes on, and then you look at it, it's like, seriously? Only 3 minutes? Like Something by the Beatles off of Abbey Road. Something in the way she moves. It's a 2.5 minute song, but it feels like it could be going on for 5.
Yes.
You know, so
maybe
again,
that song, it's slow. So maybe that's part of it too.
It takes you on a journey, and it's just good, tight songwriting.
Also, where did my notes go? Sorry. Some facts about the album. There's only two editions that came out post original release, and it was a 24 karat gold CD reissue in 2009.
Wow.
That had, I guess, a higher audio fidelity. And then there was a 2011 Japan release. So as far as releases, this album kind of hasn't had a lot of love when it comes to, you know, it's gone through different, I believe, publishers and stuff because of, you know, for example, ABC Dunhill doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And that was who originally produced the album. And I don't know who does it now. I think it's Warner.
Probably.
So in that sense, it just kind of hasn't had a lot of love in the most recent years.
Yeah.
You know, while also having, some would argue, one of the most classic songs ever. So it's a weird.
And this album precedes Joe Walsh's work with the Eagles.
The song on this album is played every time the Eagles play. Every time the Eagles perform a show and Joe Walsh is there, they play this song.
Really?
Yeah, because you know they typically when I saw them, they did like 2 or 3 Joe Walsh songs.
Yeah.
And I've looked on like live albums of the Eagles, and they play Joe Walsh music because he's there, and his songs are so popular.
Oh,
like if he's there, you're gonna play Rocky Mountain Way if everyone else can. I mean, so And I think that speaks to the songs kind of even surpassing maybe the musicians. Kind of back to that, like how Barnstorm, it turned, it may have like in a what am I trying to say, capitalistic way, maybe it turned into the Joe Walsh logo, right?
Yeah.
But each member had their own hand in the songs.
Sure.
So, and it shows to where you could have the Eagles play those songs and they're willing to play them because the musicianship is there. The song is there. It is worth it. It's a classic. So even regardless of Bad Blood, the people on the album should be proud of what they did.
Yeah, and I was never, as I said at the beginning, I heard this song everywhere on the radio when I was growing up, all the time, but didn't always connect it to Joe Walsh, didn't always know who Joe Walsh was. And once I started getting into the Eagles and realized Joe Walsh was one of the Eagles, then I started, understanding. He had a solo career at some point and did some solo work and so forth. But yeah, he's always, stuck out in my mind as just one of the quintessential guitar players. His style is very unique. Yeah, boy, he's an interesting guy.
Very, and I mean, maybe it's because of it, sort of maybe a Brian Wilson effect, where it's just years of crazy partying, kind of just takes it out. Oz, you can only do it for so long, and he kind of was known as being the comedian of rock and roll. So
I think it was in 1989. It could have been late 1988, but I'm pretty sure it was 1989. There's a radio station here in Austin called KLBJ, and they were pretty much like the classic rock radio station when I moved here. 1 week, Joe Walsh did a guest DJ spot, and that was the weirdest fucking week of radio I've ever heard in my life. Because he would play whatever songs he wanted, and it was great music. It was great music. But you'd hear this awesome song and then just dead radio silence.
No.
It would be like this. Dude, that song was, and it was like that. He got an hour a day for a week, and it was beautiful, man.
That is awesome.
It was the weirdest radio show ever.
Was he in town hosting it? Okay.
No, he was in the KLBJ studios doing it. Cool. It was great. It was great.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to cue into another song right now. This one in particular, Midnight Moody's, is it's one of the more open kind of orchestral songs on the album. It's, you could say it's almost, you would listen to it and not even tell it's them. You couldn't, who's I don't think there's even vocals on the song. So
that's it.
Let's check it out. All right, and we're back.
Nice.
So you see, like on that song, the eclectic nature of the songwriting and how if you listen to it, it's that same groove just played over and boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
But it's the same two phrases repeated, but he's doing different chugs or different rhythms with it. Like there's the cowbell comes in, then they pause, and you have this.
And how about that fretless bass with Kenny Passarelli, man? Wow, you got that wah all over the place. But when they settle into the groove, you really have to listen for it, man. I mean, that's tricky.
Mm-hmm. And then you get quiet, and you have the, what is it, the piccolo, or you have the wind instrument come in. And I think that's Joe Vitale playing that, and you have it changes his playing, especially. There's a lot of, I think it's flute or piccolo, something. It's all over the album.
Yeah.
And it's different. You're not hearing that in rock. I mean, what, Jethro Tull or something, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But what the song calls for, and they're writing music where they can use that.
Yeah.
Whereas other bands, you know, they aren't necessarily doing that. They're not writing music with opening for a flute or for this passage, you know, and then they're able to conclude that with that guitar solo right back into a rock and roll kind of feel.
Yeah.
And it all in all, it's that same back and forth of those two phrases. The song is just an instrumental. Probably came up in the studio. Hey, I got this cool lick. And they were just all jammed on it.
Yeah.
Sounded great.
Very kind of jazzy.
Very,
thing.
very.
You know, like let's have this short little chord progression and make a giant form out of it, and just flex our chops.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
different syncopations, different everything. So I really enjoy that about specifically this song and the album, because it does that a lot.
Yeah.
Specifically with the songs in general, the way it's laid out. You have that song, and then it cuts into a song called Happy Ways, which is real up, bouncy, poppy. It sounds completely different than what you just heard.
Yeah.
And I think I'll actually play just a tad of that so you can kind of hear it. After you hear this beautiful melody, this is what you get. So you get, you know, the album is definitely taking you on a ride.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. So, and it's playing with the audience and audibly when you hear like the beginning of Midnight Moody's, that pan from the left to the right in the headphones. And then he's doing things to keep you interested musically. And then also, I like how he does things visually, like with the album. I'm looking at it right now, and it's the airplane, and it's upside down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at first, when I first listened to the album, I never really picked up on that.
Yeah.
And then it just was until like actually doing research and getting into him, I just realized, wait.
Well, and even the album title was a play on words. The smoker you drink, the player I get was roughly like the more you smoke, the better I play.
Yes. So back to the comedian of rock and roll. He's just he's having fun.
Yeah.
But also not, I guess, taking it too serious.
I mean, especially with songs like Life's Been Good and so forth. I mean, just hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, satirical commentary on the industry and the lifestyle.
Every lifestyle. Almost, you could say he does it in the writing. He kind of has commentary of the music with the music itself, and that he's taking all these genres that he's loved, you know, because he's played with so many people. Yeah. So many bands, and just eras of rock and roll. Yeah. He's able to incorporate, I think also a fun fact, he gave Jimmy Page that famous Les Paul, that Gold Top, I believe, that Jimmy's always seen playing. That was originally Joe Walsh's guitar.
Oh, wow.
But he had two of them, two Gold Top Les Pauls, gave one to Jimmy, kept the other one, the better one. In his words. And so that's the story of how Jimmy got this famous guitar, and that just speaks to Joe Walsh's imprint in rock and roll, where it's eclectic, it's so spanning.
I mean, there's another cool story where Stevie Nicks, she wrote the song Has Anyone Ever Written Anything for You? Beautiful, beautiful little ballad, you know, and Joe Walsh was the inspiration for that. You know, and I can't remember the entire story, and I don't want to try and put it out right now for fear of getting any facts wrong. But I've heard her talk about that before, and it's just cool that, you know, he touches everybody. You know?
Exactly, and you might not even know it. Like I was a Joe Walsh fan before I knew who he was, and I guess that's probably speaking to it, like Rocky Mountain Way. I loved the song, and I heard that was the first song I had heard, specifically from this album, also, but. Without realizing that was him, I was already a fan. Yeah. Without realizing that he was a part of the Eagles, I was already a fan. Without even realizing he was in Barnstorm or did all these other groups, the James Gang, Funk 49. Yeah. You know what I mean? Writing classic rock and roll riffs. I would never have guessed that it was just this. Sure, he's been around, but it's him being around great people too. Yeah. And I think he'll be the first to admit that it's like, while he might be a genius in his own right, it's being surrounded by other influential people to write great material.
Yeah. Well, I think music does that to musicians.
Definitely,
you know, if you're surrounded with other good musicians. I mean, I played in orchestras, and I was never a great classical bass player, but when I was able to play in a bass section with other really good bass players, I immediately felt my playing step up. You know, and I think it's a very similar thing. You know, musicians that get around other good musicians, and it just kind of
Everyone gets better.
feeds. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally can hear it on this album.
Yeah,
and I can hear, you know, even it being admitted from the man himself saying,
Yeah.
you know, I wouldn't be half as much and share, you know, willingly share songwriting credits. That's, you know, a big part of it too. So it all just culminates into this grand album that we get.
Right.
Let me see if there's any other fun facts I can pull up for anyone. Oh, well, I did learn that this album went through where it didn't have any special editions as far as like the audio besides the 24 karat gold. I don't know what that does to it, but there was usually, in addition to the 2-channel version they had, so the stereo mix, they put out a 4-channel version, quadraphonic. So they remixed it for that quadraphonic sound on LP, and I don't even know what that would look. How do you play that? What would that look like? Is it all on one LP? Is it a 2-player system? You know, I've never heard of a quadraphonic LP system, but I'm sure the way that this
We'll have
album,
to recruit an audio file for that one.
yeah. I mean, as far as the production goes, this album I could see warranting that, and that goes to,
Yeah, sure.
you know, the crazy mix of soundscapes that he does. And I'll play another song, and then we'll get into our final thoughts here.
Okay.
And we'll start with Meadows. This is another song that it was the other single from the album, and it's also the other one that I would say is probably most radio. So it's, you know, great. That's why it was the single, but it has its own charm, you know, considering how weird and avant-garde the album kind of goes. So. All right.
Yeah. I remember that one too.
Another rockin' tune.
Yeah.
That one also kind of has that sort of bit of a Rocky Mountain way in it's real like classic rock, but then it has that space where it kind of breathes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very open sounding song, you know.
It kind of also reminds me a little bit of that Midnight Moody's theme, where it's got this riff that's kind of a central theme of the song. Like he took this really good riff that is it's a good like foundation riff, but also can be a transitional riff in that it's going from one piece of music to the next. It can transition to that open really well, but then it can also get real climactic, and if you're playing it right.
Yeah.
So, as far as my final thoughts, I mean, just a very well produced, in my mind, songwriting wise, well done, well played. All the musicians
Absolutely.
did their job. And I think went above and beyond when it comes to sitting in a spatial like set, listening to it and thinking about space and how they're using it and how they're the swelling of things, the panning of certain guitars, of keyboards, of where things are coming in, how things are fading out, delays, even instruments used. We're going to use the flute here. We're going to use wind instruments here. Like it feels like it's so thoughtfully planned out while also feeling so spontaneous.
Yeah. And, you know, like you said, it's really good songwriting. And something that strikes me about the sound is, even though it's something that we would consider classic rock nowadays, it still sounds fresh. And and to me, that's about that ensemble. You know, I don't know how they tracked it, but I think you're probably accurate in guessing that they were probably playing together as a band, you know, in the studio and getting this down and playing as a unit, and that really comes through. And I think that's a lot of what makes it sound continually fresh, is that you just hear a band playing, you know, really just top-notch musicians playing this music. And that's not, you know, that's not a slight on today's production qualities, really. Even though we do things differently, you know, we tend to track separately and stuff like that. Sometimes, not all the time. Overdubs and what have you, and do different production styles. But it really makes you appreciate that, you know, that ability of just being a solid musician. And that really comes through on this record.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to close it out with the song Days Gone By, which this one definitely is another example of just the songwriting and the eclectic nature of the album, and just it might encapsulate what I'm trying to say in just how diverse everything can be. So we'll end on that.